Guard Captain William Harrison had stood watch over the British royal family for 15 years. But tonight felt different. As he walked the ancient corridors of Windsor Castle at 3 in the morning, his footsteps echoed against stone walls that had witnessed centuries of secrets. The weight of his ceremonial sword felt heavier than usual, and the shadows seemed to whisper of changes coming to the monarchy itself. The call had come to ours. Earlier, from the palace private secretary, speaking in the coded language that royal staff used when discussing matters too sensitive for normal communication. "Captain Harrison, we need you to review the special protocols tonight. The items in Vault 7 require additional security assessment." Vault 7 was not mentioned in any official documents. It didn't appear on architectural plans or security briefings. Most guards served their entire careers without knowing of its existence. Hidden deep beneath Windsor Castle, where even the most trusted personnel were forbidden to venture. Harrison had been granted access only 3 times in his 15 years of service, each occasion marking a moment of profound change for the royal institution. As he descended the narrow stone staircase that few living souls had walked, Harrison reflected on the conversations that had been circulating among senior palace staff. The monarchy was evolving, adapting to a world that questioned the relevance of ancient traditions. Public opinion polls showed declining support, particularly among younger generations who saw the royal family as an expensive anachronism in an age of social media and global democracy. The vault door stood before him, its steel construction a jarring contrast to the medieval stonework surrounding it. The electronic lock required 3 separate authentication methods: his fingerprint, a retinal scan, and a voice recognition system that had been programmed to recognize only 7 individuals in the entire kingdom.
As
the heavy door swung open, Harrison entered a chamber that contained secrets worth more than most people could imagine. The room was climate-controlled and lined with temperature-resistant storage units, each containing artifacts that the public would never see. But these weren't treasures in the traditional sense. No golden crowns or jeweled scepters filled these shelves. Instead, Harrison found himself surrounded by documents, photographs, and objects that told the real story of the British monarchy's survival through centuries of political upheaval. His flashlight illuminated a leather-bound journal dating from 1936, containing handwritten notes from King Edward VIII during the abdication crisis. The official history books told of a king who gave up his throne for love. But the private correspondence revealed a more complex truth: secret negotiations with Nazi officials, financial arrangements that compromised national security, and family betrayals that nearly destroyed the monarchy from within. Adjacent shelves held files from World War II, documenting the royal family's actual role during the London Blitz, while public propaganda showed the king and queen bravely remaining. In London, these documents reveal the complex web of contingency plans, secret bunkers, and escape routes that had been prepared in case the German invasion succeeded. More troubling were the communications with Commonwealth governments about potential exile arrangements if Britain fell. Harrison moved deeper into the vault, his trained eye cataloging items that represented decades of careful reputation management. Photographs from the 1960s showed members of the royal family at private parties where their behavior contradicted their public image of moral leadership. Financial documents revealed offshore accounts and investment strategies that, while legal, would generate enormous scandal if made public. But perhaps most significant were the modern files. Intelligence reports from the past decade detailing threats to the monarchy that went far beyond simple Republican sentiment. Foreign governments seeking to destabilize British institutions, financial speculators betting against the pound during royal crises, and domestic political movements that saw the crown as an obstacle to genuine democratic reform. Harrison paused before a recently added folder marked with today's date. Inside, he found a comprehensive analysis prepared by government advisors outlining scenarios for the monarchy's future. The document painted a stark picture: declining public support, increasing costs, and growing political pressure for constitutional reform that could fundamentally alter the crown's role or eliminate it entirely. The analysis included polling, data that hadn't been released to the public, showing that nearly 60% of citizens under 30 believe the monarchy should be abolished within the next generation. More damaging were focus group reports indicating that many people viewed the royal family as irrelevant celebrities rather than constitutional guardians. Their ceremonial roles seen as expensive theater rather than meaningful governance. As Harrison read through the recommendations, he understood why he had been summoned to review these materials. The document outlined contingency plans for various scenarios, from gradual reduction of royal roles to complete Republican transition. Each scenario required careful management of the secrets contained in this vault, ensuring that damaging revelations didn't accelerate the monarchy's decline. The final section dealt with what palace insiders called the transition question: how to manage the royal family's vast private wealth and international relationships if their constitutional role ended. Swiss bank accounts, property holdings across multiple countries, and business relationships with foreign monarchies and corporations created a financial empire that extended far beyond Britain's borders. Harrison closed the folder and surveyed the vault's contents with new understanding. These weren't just historical artifacts, they were insurance policies, bargaining chips, and potential weapons in a struggle for the monarchy's survival. Every scandal averted, every crisis managed, every secret kept had contributed to the crown's the ability to adapt and persist through centuries of change. His radio crackled with the routine. Check-in from the guard rotation above. Captain Harrison, status report from Vault 7. All secure, he responded, using the standard protocol. Continuing assessment. But as he prepared to examine more files, Harrison wondered if he was documenting the crown's greatest secrets, or compiling evidence for its final chapter. The very existence of this vault suggested that the monarchy had always been more fragile than it appeared, sustained by careful management of truth as much as by tradition and ceremony. Harrison's attention was drawn to a section of the vault he had never been authorized to access before tonight. The steel cabinets bore different markings, not the traditional royal cipher, but symbols that suggested international significance. As he opened the first drawer, he discovered documents that revealed the monarchy's role in global intelligence operations, spanning decades. The files detailed a network of relationships that the public never suspected existed. Photographs showed senior royals meeting privately with heads of intelligence agencies from allied nations, their conversations touching on matters of international security that went far beyond ceremonial diplomacy. Letters written in careful diplomatic language outlined arrangements where royal residences served as neutral meeting grounds for sensitive negotiations. One particularly thick folder contained correspondence between the current monarch and leaders of Commonwealth nations during various international crises. The documents revealed that the crown had served as a backdoor communication channel when official diplomatic relations became strained. During the Falklands conflict, apartheid era South Africa, various Middle Eastern tensions, the royal family had facilitated conversations that couldn't occur through normal government channels. Harrison found himself reading about meetings that had shaped world events while remaining completely hidden from public knowledge. A handwritten note from 1982 described a private dinner where representatives from opposing sides of a regional conflict had reached preliminary agreements that later became formal peace treaties. The location was given as a private estate in Scotland, but Harrison recognized the description as Balmoral Castle. More recent documents showed the continuing evolution of this role. In an age of social media and 24-hour news cycles, the monarchy had adapted its methods while maintaining its function as a diplomatic bridge between nations. Private jets registered to royal foundations carried messages between capitals, while hunting weekends and polo matches provided cover for international negotiations that required absolute secrecy. The next drawer contained financial records that painted a picture of economic influence extending far beyond Britain's borders. The royal family's private investments weren't just personal wealth management. They represented strategic positioning in key industries in emerging markets around the world. Energy companies in the Middle East, technology firms in Asia, and development projects in Africa all carried subtle royal connections. Harrison discovered that these investments weren't solely about profit. The financial network served intelligence purposes, providing British agencies with insights into foreign economies and political developments that conventional diplomatic channels might miss. A mining company in which the royal family held shares could provide early warning about political instability in resource-rich nations, but perhaps most intriguing were the cultural preservation projects hidden within the royal family's charitable activities. What appeared to be simple educational foundations were actually complex operations designed to maintain British influence in former colonies and emerging democracies. Schools, hospitals, and cultural centers built with royal patronage served as listening posts for British intelligence while genuinely improving local communities. The documents revealed partnerships with major universities that went beyond honorary degrees and ceremonial visits. Research projects funded through royal trusts were producing intelligence about everything from climate change, impacts on global stability, to technological developments in potential adversary nations. Academic conferences hosted at royal residences brought together experts, whose casual conversations were carefully monitored and analyzed. Harrison paused at a folder marked Future Protocols. It contained planning documents for scenarios he hadn't previously considered. If the British monarchy were to end, what would happen to this vast intelligence network? The files outlined contingency plans for transferring assets, relationships, and operations to other institutions while ensuring that sensitive information didn't fall into hostile hands. One particularly sobering document discussed the possibility of the royal family maintaining some form of intelligence role even after losing their constitutional position. The analysis suggested that their international relationships and financial resources could make them valuable private assets for British intelligence, operating with greater flexibility than official government agents. The economic implications were staggering. Harrison learned that the royal family's private wealth was intertwined with national economic interests in ways that made simple abolition of the monarchy extremely complicated. Canceling royal charters, dissolving trusts, and redistributing assets could trigger international financial consequences that governments were reluctant to risk. Foreign investment in British institutions often included specific clauses related to royal stability. International banks held bonds tied to royal properties. Foreign governments had treaties that referenced monarchical continuity. Cultural exchanges relied on royal patronage that couldn't easily be replaced by elected officials. As Harrison continued reading, he began to understand that the modern monarchy had evolved into something far more complex than ceremonial leadership. The crown had become a crucial component of Britain's soft power infrastructure, maintaining relationships and facilitating operations that democratic governments couldn't pursue directly. The intelligence files revealed operations in countries where Britain had no official diplomatic presence. Royal family members attending sporting events, cultural festivals, and private celebrations created opportunities for information gathering and relationship building that professional diplomats couldn't access. A prince's interest in environmental conservation opened doors in regions where British government officials would be viewed with suspicion. The most recent entries described how social media and digital communications had created new challenges for royal intelligence operations. Every public appearance was documented and analyzed by foreign governments, making traditional cover stories more difficult to maintain. But the files also showed adaptation, private foundations using encrypted communications, charitable activities that created legitimate reasons for international travel, and business relationships that provided natural cover for sensitive meetings. Harrison realized that protecting these secrets wasn't just about preserving royal reputation, it was about maintaining an intelligence capability that had served British interests for generations. The guards who stood outside palace gates weren't just protecting buildings and people. They were protecting a network of relationships and operations that extended around the globe. His radio crackled again with another routine check. Above him, tourists would soon begin gathering for the changing of the guard ceremony, completely unaware that the colorful pageantry masked one of the world's most sophisticated intelligence operations. Harrison's exploration led him to the vault's most restricted section, where where temperature-controlled cases held artifacts that seemed almost mystical in their significance. These weren't state treasures displayed in the Tower of London, but objects that carried deeper meaning for the institution of monarchy itself. As he examined them under carefully controlled lighting, Harrison began to understand why these items required such extraordinary protection. The first case contained what appeared to be an unremarkable wooden box, its surface worn smooth by centuries of handling. The accompanying documentation revealed it to be the original charter box from which the first monarchs had ruled, containing fragments of documents that predated the Magna Carta. These weren't just historical curiosities. They represented the legal foundation upon which the entire constitutional monarchy was built. Legal scholars had debated for centuries about the source of royal authority. But these documents provided concrete evidence of agreements between early rulers and their subjects that had never been formally revoked. Modern constitutional lawyers had examined these materials and concluded that they still carried legal weight, creating obligations and privileges that both supported and constrained monarchical power in ways the public never realized. Adjacent cases held items that connected the British crown to other royal houses across Europe and beyond. Marriage contracts from medieval alliances, sealed agreements about territorial claims that were still technically valid, and correspondence that revealed ongoing relationships between monarchies that supposedly had no political relevance in the modern world. Harrison found himself reading about a network of European royal families who maintained regular private communication despite their country's democratic governments. These weren't social relationships, but working partnerships that influenced everything from international trade agreements to diplomatic protocols. When European leaders met at economic summits, their monarchs were often conducting parallel conversations that shaped the outcomes. One particularly fascinating collection documented the monarchy's role in what intelligence professionals called deep cultural preservation. Beyond the obvious tourist attractions and ceremonial functions, the royal family maintained traditions, languages, and customs that served strategic purposes. Ancient Scottish ceremonies performed at royal events weren't just picturesque traditions. They maintained connections to regional identities that could prove valuable if political circumstances changed. The documentation revealed that several independence movements in former British territories had been quietly influenced by royal cultural programs that preserved pro-monarchy sentiments among certain populations. When political tensions arose, these cultural connections provided alternative channels for maintaining British influence even in hostile environments. Harrison discovered records of the monarchy's involvement in what could only be described as cultural intelligence operations, royal patronage of arts organizations, museums, and educational institutions created networks of influential individuals who remained sympathetic to British interests. A symphony orchestra supported by Royal Foundation could provide cover for intelligence operatives, while an art exhibition created opportunities for sensitive meetings between government representatives. The most intriguing files dealt with religious and spiritual aspects of monarchy that went beyond the Church of England connection. Ancient coronation rituals weren't just pageantry. They incorporated elements that created psychological and cultural bonds that persisted across generations. Studies commissioned by the palace had examined the almost mystical attachment that many subjects felt toward the crown, finding that it operated on levels deeper than rational political support. These psychological bonds had proven remarkably resilient during times of royal scandal and political change. Even citizens who intellectually opposed monarchy often found themselves emotionally invested in royal events and crises. The files revealed that palace advisors had studied these phenomena extensively, developing strategies for maintaining public connection even as traditional sources of royal authority diminished. Harrison found documentation of carefully orchestrated public relations campaigns that operated across multiple generations. Royal appearances at hospitals, schools, and community events weren't just goodwill gestures. They were precisely calculated to reinforce emotional bonds between the crown and different demographic groups. Each royal family member was assigned specific audiences and roles, designed to maximize their psychological impact. The strategic use of royal ceremonies had been refined to almost scientific precision. State funerals, weddings, and coronations weren't just national celebrations, they were carefully choreographed events designed to reinforce cultural identity and political stability. The files contained detailed analyses of how specific ritual elements affected public mood and political support. But perhaps most revealing were the contingency plans for maintaining these cultural and psychological connections, even if the constitutional monarchy ended. The documents outlined scenarios where the royal family could continue serving as cultural ambassadors and symbolic leaders without formal political power, maintaining their influence through foundation work, ceremonial roles, and international relationships. Harrison learned about secret agreements with major media companies that would ensure continued royal coverage even after political changes. Television networks, publishing houses, and digital platforms had committed to maintaining royal content because of its proven audience appeal, creating a form of cultural immortality that transcended political relevance. The files revealed partnerships with entertainment industries that went beyond simple celebrity status. Royal family members had worked with filmmakers, authors, and artists to ensure that portrayals of monarchy reinforced positive associations while subtly discrediting Republican alternatives. These weren't crude propaganda efforts, but sophisticated cultural influence operations that shaped public perception over decades. International cultural exchanges funded by royal foundations had created networks of foreign citizens with positive associations toward British monarchy. Students who had studied in royal scholarship programs, artists who had exhibited in royal galleries, and academics who had participated in royal conferences formed a global network of informal ambassadors for monarchical values. As Harrison reviewed these materials, he began to understand that the question wasn't simply whether the British monarchy would survive political changes, but whether its cultural and psychological influence could persist regardless of constitutional arrangements. The institution had evolved mechanisms for maintaining relevance and influence that operated independently of formal political power. The vault's contents suggested that the monarchy had been preparing for various forms of transition while ensuring that its essential functions could continue under different arrangements. Whether as constitutional monarchs, cultural ambassadors, or private citizens with extraordinary international connections, the royal family had positioned itself to remain influential across multiple possible futures. As Harrison delved deeper into the vault's most sensitive materials, he discovered files that revealed the monarchy's involvement in what could only be described as crisis management on a global scale. These documents showed that the royal family had served as unofficial mediators during some of the world's most dangerous political situations, using their unique position to facilitate negotiations that prevented conflicts from escalating into full-scale wars. The files contained transcripts of conversations that had never appeared in any official diplomatic records. During the Cuban Missile Crisis, when the world teetered on the edge of nuclear war, private communications between the British monarch and Soviet leadership had helped establish bichannel communications that proved crucial to the peaceful resolution. The royal family's centuries-old connections to European aristocracy, some of whom held influential positions in Soviet satellite states, had provided communication pathways when traditional diplomatic channels failed. More recent documents revealed the monarchy's ongoing role in managing international crises that threatened global stability. During the 2008 financial crisis, royal family members had conducted private meetings with central bank governors and finance ministers from multiple countries, helping coordinate responses that prevented complete economic collapse. These meetings had occurred under the cover of cultural events and private social gatherings, allowing for frank discussions that couldn't happen in official government settings. Harrison found evidence of the monarchy's involvement in counterterrorism operations that spanned decades. Royal residences had served as safe houses for defectors and intelligence assets, while royal events provided cover for sensitive exchanges of information between intelligence agencies. The annual season of state banquets, garden parties, and ceremonial events created perfect opportunities for intelligence professionals to meet without attracting attention. The documents revealed that several major terrorist plots had been disrupted. Through intelligence gathered during royal functions, foreign dignitaries attending state dinners had unknowingly provided information that led to the prevention of attacks. While palace staff members with intelligence training had gathered crucial intelligence from casual conversations with international visitors. One particularly detailed file documented the monarchy's role in managing the transition of former colonial territories to independence. Rather than simply withdrawing British influence, the royal family had worked to maintain relationships that continued serving British strategic interests while genuinely supporting the new nation's development. Royal visits to former colonies weren't just ceremonial gestures. They were intelligence-gathering missions that helped British policymakers understand evolving political situations. Harrison discovered that the Commonwealth Organization, with the monarch as its head, served as a sophisticated intelligence-sharing network. Information flowed between member nations through channels that bypassed normal diplomatic protocols, allowing for rapid response to emerging threats and opportunities. Economic development projects funded through royal foundations provided cover for intelligence operations in strategically important regions. The files revealed the monarchy's involvement in what intelligence professionals called soft intervention, using cultural and economic influence to shape political outcomes without direct military involvement. When democratic governments and Commonwealth nations faced internal challenges, royal representatives had quietly provided advice, resources, and international support that helped maintain stability. But perhaps most surprising were the documents, showing the royal family's role in managing Britain's relationship with emerging superpowers. As China's global influence expanded, royal family members had established relationships with Chinese leadership that operated independently of official government diplomacy. Cultural exchanges, business partnerships, and educational programs had created channels for communication that proved valuable when official relations became strained. The monarchy's financial investments had been strategically positioned to provide early warning about economic and political developments in key regions around the world. Royal foundations owned stakes in companies operating in sensitive areas, providing British intelligence with insights into everything from resource availability to political stability that couldn't be obtained through conventional means. Harrison found documentation of the monarchy's role in cybersecurity operations that most people would never imagine. Royal residences were equipped with sophisticated electronic monitoring systems that could intercept communications from foreign intelligence services. International visitors to royal events unknowingly provided access to their electronic devices, allowing British intelligence to gather information about foreign government operations and intentions. The digital age had created new opportunities for royal intelligence operations. Social media monitoring systems analyzed public reactions to royal events across different countries, providing insights into political sentiment and potential instability. Online cultural programs funded by royal foundations created platforms for identifying and recruiting potential intelligence assets in foreign countries. The files revealed that the monarchy had been adapting to technological changes while maintaining its core intelligence functions. Encrypted communication systems allowed royal family members to maintain secure contact with intelligence networks around the world, while advanced surveillance technologies integrated into royal properties provided comprehensive monitoring of international visitors and communications. But the documents also showed the challenges facing royal intelligence operations in an increasingly transparent world. Investigative journalists, government accountability advocates, and foreign intelligence services were all working to expose the monarchy's covert activities. Several operations had been compromised when details leaked to the media, forcing the development of more sophisticated cover stories and operational security measures. Harrison discovered contingency plans for maintaining royal intelligence capabilities even if the monarchy faced significant political changes. The network of relationships, financial resources, and operational infrastructure that had been built over decades could potentially survive constitutional reform. Continuing to serve British interests under different arrangements, the files outlined Scenarios where former royal family members could continue intelligence work as private citizens, using their international relationships and financial resources to maintain capabilities that official government agencies couldn't duplicate. Their unique position, as symbols of British culture and history, would continue providing access to foreign leaders and societies, regardless of their formal political status. As Harrison reviewed these materials, he began to understand that the question of the monarchy's future wasn't simply about constitutional arrangements or public opinion polls. The royal family had become integral to Britain's national security infrastructure in ways that made simple abolition extremely complicated and potentially dangerous to the country's international position and security. Harrison's investigation took a dramatic turn when he discovered files that were dated within the past 6 months, revealing that the monarchy was actively preparing for scenarios that could fundamentally transform or end their constitutional role. These weren't theoretical contingency plans, but operational preparations being implemented in real time, suggesting that significant changes were anticipated sooner than the public realized. The most recent documents outlined what palace insiders called Operation Continuity, a comprehensive strategy for maintaining the royal family's influence and capabilities regardless of political developments. The plan had been developed in response to polling data showing accelerating decline in monarchical support and intelligence reports, suggesting that Republican movements were gaining organizational strength and financial backing. Harrison found detailed assessments of international support for the British monarchy that painted a concerning picture. Traditional allies were beginning to view the royal family as a diplomatic liability rather than an asset, while emerging powers saw monarchical connections as impediments to developing modern relationships with Britain. Several Commonwealth nations were actively considering removing the monarch as their head of state, which could trigger a cascade of similar decisions across the former empire. The files revealed that foreign governments had been conducting their own analyses of British political stability, with many concluding that the monarchy's position was more precarious than publicly acknowledged. Intelligence reports showed that some nations were already positioning themselves for a post-monarchical Britain, developing relationships with Republican political movements and preparing for different diplomatic arrangements. More troubling were the economic assessments showing that the monarchy's financial position, while substantial, was not sufficient to maintain their current influence without constitutional backing. The royal family's private wealth was significant, but couldn't sustain the global operations and international relationships that depended on state resources and official status. Private funding could maintain some activities, but not the comprehensive the network of operations that had been built over centuries. Operation Continuity included plans for gradually transferring key assets and relationships to private foundations and international organizations that could continue operating independently of British governmental changes. Cultural programs, educational initiatives, and charitable foundations were being restructured to ensure they could maintain their intelligence and diplomatic functions even if royal patronage became politically controversial. Harrison discovered that several major international corporations had agreed to provide ongoing support for royal activities through business partnerships and charitable contributions. These arrangements would allow the royal family to maintain international travel, cultural programs, and relationship-building activities, even if government funding was eliminated. The corporations saw value in maintaining access to the royal New York's global connections and cultural influence. The files revealed unprecedented cooperation between the monarchy and intelligence services from allied nations who wanted to preserve the operational capabilities that the royal network provided. American, Canadian, and Australian intelligence agencies had all developed contingency plans for maintaining their relationships with royal intelligence assets, even if the constitutional monarchy ended. But perhaps most significant were the documents outlining plans for what could only be described as a royal government in exile scenario. If political changes made it impossible for the royal family to continue their constitutional role in Britain, detailed preparations had been made for establishing operations in other Commonwealth nations or friendly countries where they could continue serving British intelligence interests. Several Commonwealth Nations had quietly indicated their willingness to host royal operations if circumstances required it. These weren't just ceremonial offers, but practical arrangements involving facilities, funding, and operational support that would allow the Royal Intelligence Network to continue functioning. The cultural and historical connections between these nations and the monarchy provided natural cover for such arrangements. Harrison found intelligence assessments suggesting that the timing of any major changes to the monarchy might be influenced by international crises requiring the royal network's capabilities. If global tensions increased, or if Britain faced significant international challenges, political opposition to the monarchy might decrease as the public recognized the value of their international relationships and intelligence capabilities. The files revealed that the royal family had been strengthening their relationships with international partners. While these relationships were still backed by constitutional authority, once that official status was lost, rebuilding such relationships would be much more difficult and expensive. The current period represented a crucial window for securing commitments that could sustain royal operations under different political arrangements. Modern technology had created new opportunities for maintaining royal influence without traditional constitutional backing. Digital platforms, social media networks, and online cultural programs could reach global audiences and maintain royal relevance even if their official role changed. Several major technology companies had agreed to provide platforms and technical support for royal digital operations. The documents showed that younger members of the royal family were being specifically prepared for scenarios where they might need to operate as private citizens rather than constitutional monarchs. Their education, training, and public roles were being shaped to ensure they could maintain international relationships and cultural influence, regardless of their formal status. But the files also revealed the enormous risks involved in these transition plans. Losing constitutional protection could expose royal family members to legal challenges, financial investigations, and security threats that their current status helped prevent. Several foreign governments were already preparing to pursue claims against royal assets if the constitutional monarchy ended and diplomatic immunity was lost. The intelligence services' own assessments warned that the transition period would be extremely dangerous, with foreign adversaries likely to exploit any confusion or instability to damage British interests. The royal network's extensive knowledge of sensitive operations and relationships could become a target for hostile intelligence services seeking to compromise British security. Harrison discovered that contingency plans included provisions for protecting royal family members who might face personal danger during political transitions. Safe houses had been prepared in multiple countries, and security arrangements had been developed that could operate independently of British government support if necessary. As he reviewed these recent files, Harrison realized that the monarchy was essentially preparing for its own potential obsolescence while working to ensure that its most valuable functions could survive in different forms. The institution was adapting to political realities while trying to preserve capabilities that had served British interests for generations. As Harrison completed his review of the vault's contents, he found himself holding the most recent file, a comprehensive assessment completed just days earlier that would determine the immediate future of the Royal Intelligence Network. Document bore the highest classification markings he had ever seen, indicating that its contents were known to fewer than a dozen individuals worldwide. The assessment began with a stark conclusion: the traditional monarchy's constitutional role would likely end within the next decade. But the intelligence and diplomatic capabilities it had developed were too valuable to lose. The challenge was managing this transition in a way that preserved essential functions while adapting to new political realities. Public opinion, research conducted by the world's most sophisticated polling organizations, had identified specific triggers that would accelerate demands for Republican government. Economic crises that highlighted royal wealth, generational changes in leadership, or major international embarrassments could rapidly shift public sentiment beyond the point where constitutional monarchy remained viable. But the same research revealed that the British public distinguished between the monarchy as a political institution and the royal family as cultural symbols. Even citizens who opposed monarchical government often supported maintaining the royal family in some capacity. As representatives of British heritage and international ambassadors, this distinction provided the foundation for Operation Continuity's most ambitious plans. The file outlined what intelligence professionals termed functional succession, transferring the monarchy's most valuable capabilities to new institutional arrangements that could operate without constitutional backing. Cultural foundations, international charities, educational organizations were being restructured to absorb intelligence operations, diplomatic relationships, and influence networks that had operated under royal cover. Harrison discovered that several major universities had agreed to establish programs that would employ former royal intelligence assets as researchers, lecturers, and cultural specialists. These academic positions would provide legitimate cover for continued intelligence work while maintaining the international relationships that had proven so valuable. Academic conferences, research projects, and educational exchanges could continue, facilitating sensitive communications and information gathering. International cultural organizations were being prepared to absorb royal diplomatic functions. Museums, arts foundations, and heritage organizations had developed programs that would allow former royal family members to continue their relationship-building activities under different institutional arrangements. These organizations already possessed the international networks and cultural legitimacy needed to maintain the royal family's soft power influence. The business sector had responded with unprecedented support for MTE maintaining royal capabilities. In private form, technology companies, financial institutions, and multinational corporations had recognized the value of the royal network's global relationships and intelligence insights. Formal and informal partnerships were being established that would provide ongoing funding and operational support for activities that served both commercial and national interests. But the file also contained sobering warnings about the risks involved in these transition plans. Foreign intelligence services were closely monitoring the monarchy's preparations, seeking opportunities to exploit the transition period for their own advantage. Several hostile nations had already begun developing strategies for disrupting royal intelligence operations and turning royal assets to their own purposes. The document revealed that cyber warfare capabilities were being specifically targeted at royal communication networks and financial systems. Foreign hackers had attempted to penetrate Royal Foundation computer systems, seeking evidence of intelligence activities that could be used to embarrass the British government or compromise ongoing operations. Advanced defensive measures were being implemented, but the attacks were becoming increasingly sophisticated. Harrison found intelligence assessments warning that the transition period could create windows of vulnerability that Britain's enemies would seek to exploit. Disrupting royal intelligence networks could degrade British capabilities for gathering information about foreign threats, managing international crises, and maintaining influence in strategically important regions. The file outlined specific scenarios where loss of royal intelligence capabilities could have serious consequences for British national security. Monitoring of terrorist networks in former colonial territories. Early warning systems for financial crises. And communication channels with hostile governments, all depended heavily on royal operations that might not survive political transitions. But perhaps most concerning were the assessments of what foreign governments might do with royal intelligence assets if they gained access to them. The network of relationships, operational methods, and sensitive information accumulated over centuries could provide hostile nations with unprecedented insights into British vulnerabilities and strategic thinking. The final section of the file contained recommendations for the immediate future that would shape Harrison's own role as a royal guard. Security protocols were being enhanced to protect against foreign penetration of royal facilities and operations. Intelligence screening for palace staff was being intensified, and communication security was being upgraded to military-grade standards. Harrison learned that guards like himself were being assessed for potential roles in post-constitutional arrangements. Those with appropriate backgrounds and security clearances might continue protecting royal family members and assets even if their official status changed. Private security companies were being established that could provide protection and operational support independently of government resources. The document concluded with a timeline suggesting that major decisions about the monarchy's future would be made within the next 18 months. Political developments, economic circumstances, and international events would all influence the timing. But palace strategists believed that the current period of uncertainty couldn't continue indefinitely without causing serious damage to the institution's effectiveness. As Harrison secured the files and prepared to leave the vault, he understood that his night's work had revealed far more than historical secrets. He had been reviewing the operational plans for one of the most significant political transitions in British history. The transformation of an ancient institution into something entirely new, while preserving its most valuable capabilities. The weight of this knowledge settled on his shoulders as he climbed the stone stairs back to the castle's main levels. Above him, the world continued operating under assumptions about the monarchy that were already being quietly discarded by those who understood the true scope of changes ahead. His radio crackled with the morning shift change notification. Soon, tourists would gather to watch the changing of the guard ceremony, photographing and filming the colorful pageantry that had become a symbol of British tradition. They would never know that the guards they were watching were protecting not just a constitutional monarchy, but an intelligence network preparing for its own transformation into something the world had never seen before. Harrison emerged into the pre-dawn darkness, his mind processing the implications of what he had learned. The mysteries the royal guards protected were far more complex and consequential than anyone imagined. And those mysteries were about to become even more important as the monarchy faced its uncertain future. The question was no longer whether the crown would survive, but what form it would take and how effectively it could continue, serving British interests in a world that no longer believed in kings and queens.